And it goes a little something like.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Geraldine G. Mangubat from BSN Science 1A, and today we are going to discuss the female reproductive system. It will come as no surprise that the main function of the reproductive system is to enable reproduction. However, how exactly does the female reproductive system work, and how the various reproduction organs work together on a monthly basis to make reproduction possible is complex and largely not understood by most. Take a closer look at this picture. This is the female reproductive system, including the anatomical structures that create it as well as the functions that serve within the body. The individual parts of the female reproductive system can be classified as external and internal, moving from the most external organs to the most internal ones. This is the external parts, while this is the internal parts. All external female reproductive structures are contained in the vulva, which is made up of the following. The clitoris, the function of clitoris is for sexual stimulation. The labia majora and labia minora is for protection, while the vaginal opening is for lubrication. Now, moving on to the internal anatomy of the female reproductive organs. The internal organs of the female reproductive tract are located in the pelvic cavity and include the following: vagina, the cervix, uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes. Body. Let's take a closer look at the specifics of their functions or the physiology of the female reproductive system. Although all organs play roles in reproduction, we will begin with those structures without which natural conception would not be possible. Now let's discuss first the function of ovaries, or this. A woman's ability to conceive naturally lies in her ovaries, more specifically in her ovarian reserve, which is a lifetime supply of eggs stored in the ovaries that can be used during ovulation. So there are three main functions of the ovaries. These are: first, produces reproductive hormones, which are the estrogen and the progesterone, which guide the entire menstruation. Second, store ovarian eggs birth until menopause, and lastly, mature the eggs during the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle. Next is the function of the fallopian tube, or this area. Most segments of the fallopian tubes are densely lined with cilia, hair-like structures that enable the tubes to serve the three main functions. These are: first, allows for sperm passage from the vagina through the uterus and up near the ovary. Second, serves as locus for fertilization of the egg by the sperm in the tubal part called ampulla. And lastly, transports the fertilized or unfertilized egg down to the uterus. Next is the function of the uterus, or this area is the uterus. The muscles that make up the uterus allow it to expand up to the size of a watermelon during pregnancy, thus allowing it to serve the following four functions. First, accept the fertilized eggs implantation. Second, nourishes the embryo until the placenta grows and assumes these functions. Third, houses developing fetus. And lastly, contracts to aid the baby's passage through the birth canal. So what is the function of the cervix? Or this area is the cervix. Although it is technically considered the lower portion of the uterus, the cervix serves its own essential roles to enable conception and subsequent pregnancy development, including the following. So first, produces cervical mucus to aid sperm transport up to the female reproductive tract. Second, opens an ovulation to give passage to the sperm into the uterus after ejaculation. Next is to create a mucus plug that prevents pathogens from entering into the uterus and affecting the fetus. Next is to dilate during childbirth to allow baby's passage from the uterus to the vagina. And lastly, it is worth mentioning that in the case of pregnancy did not occur, the cervix opens during menses to allow the blood and shedding and endometrium to leave the body through the vagina. So after the cervix is the vagina. This area is the vagina. Vaginal walls are made up of muscles and mucous membranes, which along with mucous secreting glands, give it its elasticity and flexibility, those enabling it to fulfill its functions such as: first, receives the penis during intercourse. Second, allows for sperm deposition and their passage up to the reproductive tract. Third, serves as the birth canal. Fourth, protects the reproductive tract from pathogens. And lastly, self-lubricates to facilitate penile penetration outside of pregnancy. The vagina allows for menstrual blood to leave the body.
Oogenesis, the production of eggs. Oogenesis occurs in the outermost layers of the ovaries. As with sperm production, oogenesis starts with a germ cell called oogonium, but this cell undergoes mitosis to increase in number. eventually resulting in up to 1 to 2 million cells in the embryo. The cell starting meiosis is called a primary oocyte. This cell will begin the first meiotic division, but be arrested in its progress in the first prophase stage. At the time of birth, all future eggs are in the prophase stage. At adolescence, anterior pituitary hormones cause the development of a number of follicles in an ovary. This results in the primary oocyte finishing the first meiotic division. The cell divides unequally, with most of the cellular material and organelles going to one cell called a secondary oocyte, and only one set of chromosomes and a small amount of cytoplasm going to the other cell. This second cell is called the polar body and usually dies. A secondary meiotic arrest occurs, this time at the metaphase second stage. At ovulation, the secondary oocyte will be released and travel toward the uterus through the oviduct. If the secondary oocyte is fertilized, the cell continues through the meiosis too, completing meiosis, producing a second polar body and fertilized egg containing all 46 chromosomes of a human being, half of them coming from the sperm. In summary, oogenesis is the process through which female gametes or ova are formed. This process occurs in the ovaries and involves several stages. First, prenatal stage begins before birth with the formation of primary oocytes from oogonia. Second, antral stage. During each menstrual cycle, some primary oocytes resume meiosis. They develop into secondary follicles, characterized by the formation of a fluid-filled cavity called the antrum. Third, pre-ovulatory stage. Triggered by a surge in luteinizing hormone or LH, the primary oocyte completes the first meiotic division. This results in the formation of a secondary oocyte and a smaller polar body. Fourth, the ovulation. The secondary oocyte is released from the ovary and enters the fallopian tube. If fertilization occurs, the secondary oocyte completes the second meiotic division to form a mature ovum and another polar body. And lastly, the fertilization. The mature ovum can then be fertilized by a sperm cell, leading to the formation of a zygote.
And that's all included in my discussion about the female reproductive system.
And the process of oogenesis.
Once again, this is Darlene G. Magubat from BSS Science 1A. Thank you for listening. Bye!